All right. Well, we're at 12:03. Margaret, would you like to give just a brief introduction to the group and I can go from there?
Sorry, I just lost my mute button for a minute. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Director's Dialogue. This is a production from the American Planning Association City Planning and Management Division. And we are glad you are here joining us. We hope that you learned something from this webinar and that you um, can take it back to and improve your practice. To share a little bit about the City Planning and Management Division, our message is to support public sector planners and their managers in the roles that they have in order to build inclusive and sustainable communities. We try to increase the understanding of planning as a key element of policy formation and public administration at the local level of government, and we also promote the special needs of cities, including planning and management at the state and national levels of government. We're here to support you. We understand that public sector employees are um, perhaps some of the most under-resourced planners we have in our profession, and that you're not able to always go to the National Planning Conference or take additional classes. And so what we try to do is provide you resources and events such as this. We also do some underwriting and provide grants for taking the AICP exam and for attending NPC. So keep an eye on our newsletters. If you are not a member of the division, I encourage you to become one or at least sign up for our newsletter so you can know what we're doing. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Lucas, who will run this. I also want to introduce Patrice Ruffin, um, is on the call today. Ruffin Dowdell. She's our vice chair, and welcome her as well. And Lucas, handing it back to you.
All right. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. As Margaret said, this is a webinar that we've been doing for, I believe this marks 1 year. And so we're very excited about that. Glad to have been able to host this. And we are trying to just cover those topics that you don't learn in planning school. And so today we've got an awesome topic here about maximizing your career potential, and excited to dive in that with you all. If you
Hey,
see on your screen,
Lucas,
yeah.
before you get started, swap screens because we're
Yeah.
seeing your inbox.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I don't think we want to read your emails.
I thought it was locked onto. Is that? How's
There you
that?
go. That's it.
Okay, my apologies. I thought it was locked onto the Menti. If you see your screen now, it's no longer my inbox. Good thing I work for public government. Um, you can please join this Menti. We're going to just start by asking everybody a couple questions. And then we will use your responses to kind of gauge some of our questions today about maximizing your career potential. So I'll give everybody just a brief minute to scan that and get started. I know we've got about 38 participants. We're about 26 on the Menti, and we'll let everybody continue to join. If we're in the survey and you still are trying to get joined, you can look up at the top and just input that code at menti.com. Here it is one more time, and we'll go ahead and get started here. So our first question, generally, where do you consider yourself in your career journey? Just trying to help myself and our panelists today get an idea of where you're at in
It's a
years
good
of
spread.
experience. It is a good spread. Biggest group in that mid-career, 7 to 15 years. Awesome. That's almost all the responses. We'll jump over to this next one here. do you feel satisfied in where you are today? So we've got most people in those top two categories. Very satisfied, somewhat. A few in the dissatisfied or very, so that's great to see. Still extremely relevant, talking about how we can still maximize the careers we have. Jump into this next one. What's your trajectory been? Straight, somewhat straight, or lots of twists and turns? Right? What are some barriers that you've experienced in your career growth? I can scroll through here. Here we go. I'm experimenting here. I haven't tried this before. Okay, look at this.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple individual responses here on remote work, experience requirements, mentorship, family obligations, biases, career advancement. And I'll just briefly scroll here. Transitioning from the public to private sector. Yeah. Lack of a career ladder. Challenged with salary increases. So lack of room. Yep. Gender. The whole gambit.
Mm-hmm.
And then here's my last question here. What does it mean to you? To help myself, to help our panelists today, we're talking about career maximization, but that means something different to everybody. Is it fulfilling your family's needs? Is it your title, your geography? What does that mean to you? And I'm glad we're not afraid to say salary. It is a job. We're talking about work here, not hobbies. Very good. Okay. That's almost all the responses here. I'm seeing, yeah, salary, flex, responsibility and salary and responsibility. Those are all showing pretty strongly. Work-life balance. I love seeing that. That's what it means to you to maximize your career. Having flexibility. What's your title? And then lots of individual responses here about their contribution, their personal satisfaction, community goals, new skills, having security, giving back. That's awesome to see all that. So I'm going to stop the share here and we will proceed to having a dialogue. That's what this is, right? Director's Dialogue series. And so what I'm going to have to start by doing is apologizing. Margaret, that was my email earlier, trying to find your bio that I know you sent me and I've lost it. So I will introduce Virginia and then I'll have to ask you to introduce yourself, even though I like to do that. So I apologize. But I'll start by introducing Virginia to everybody who's joined us today. Virginia Norris is a senior long-range planner with Pender County, North Carolina. She works to advance sustainable and resilient community development there. With more than 15 years of experience across education, community development, and economic development spanning public service, academia, and private consulting, Virginia brings a collaborative, people-centered approach to planning. She prioritizes stakeholder engagement, ensuring that community voices meaningfully shape the planning process and inform long-term decision-making. Her professional background includes leadership roles in planning and policy research throughout the Southeast. She developed South Carolina's first agritourism ordinance, led bicycle and pedestrian planning and programs, and contributed to regional resilience strategies through policy research and disaster mitigation planning. Virginia's work blends data-driven analysis with creative problem solving to build communities that are both sustainable and vibrant. She has also served in local community leadership roles, including mentor program lead for the American Planning Association's City Planning and Management Division. When she's not engaged in community initiatives, she enjoys spending time with her family, traveling, and exploring new urban environments. Her vision is to create connected, thriving places where every community member has the opportunity to succeed. And Margaret, I will ask you to introduce yourself, but I will preface that with Margaret is an official planning legend in the state of Texas, because I know she won't mention that. So please, Margaret, if you wouldn't mind.
Thanks, Lucas. So I am retired officially from 8 to 5 work, but I still give a lot of time to the American Planning Association because that's where my professional heart is. I was formerly the director of planning and development for the city of Houston and had been there for 38 years when I retired in January of 2024. I'm currently the chair of the City Planning and Management Division and on the Division's Council with APA. My background was architecture that led me into planning, and so my legacy, what I say my legacy in Houston was a little bit more walkability. We created a Vision Zero plan and had a couple of years of actually reduced injuries and deaths in Houston while I was there. So I'm very proud of that legacy. Beyond that, I live in Houston and I'm a big birder these days. It's what I've discovered after working. So thanks, Lucas.
Absolutely. Thank you both. Because we're talking about maximizing career potential today, I'd like to ask each of you to just spend 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes describing what your career trajectory looked like, is looking like. Where'd you start? Where have you been? And how'd you get, maybe not how you got there, we can ask some more questions about that, but what was your career trajectory? Virginia, do you mind kicking us off?
Sure. I'm an oddity in planning. I say that, but I also know that there are a lot of people who are like me. I didn't start in planning. I actually went to school for theater, and that's what my bachelor's was in. Ended up working in television and in the arts for a very long time before deciding to go back to graduate school and pursue a master's in planning with a focus in public administration. So when I got out of graduate school, having switched into a new field, I was really starting at the bottom and found my way into economic development in Kentucky. I worked with the University of Kentucky as well as Eastern Kentucky University on programs throughout that region, economic development programs throughout that region. Came to South Carolina, got married, and started working in education as well as local planning and local government. And this is also where I did some of my consulting. So it was kind of a roundabout way to start planning. But a couple of years ago, I applied for a job in North Carolina and got that job as a long range planner, and was recently I recently applied for and got a job as a senior planner at Pender County, which is a step up from where I was. So that's how I kind of got where I am today. It is a roundabout way, and I'll talk a little more as we have our discussion about all the ins and outs of how I got from point A to point B.
Awesome. Thank you. Margaret, what's your
Mine's more straightforward. I'm going to be pretty much the opposite of Virginia. I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Houston in architecture and started off working for a developer. And then in 1986, when the bottom fell out of the economy in Houston and my employer wasn't doing any more development, I took what I thought would be a couple of years long stint with the city of Houston and fell in love with public sector. And so I stayed at the city. I started off as a program coordinator and just kept promoting promotion after promotion and ended up being director. Some of my career was luck, some of it was tenacity, but it was a, it's been in planning and it's been in Houston for the entire time. So it's much more of a straight line. So there's benefits to that. I never went back and got a graduate degree. And for those of you that are working or have, really spent the time with your graduate degree, like Virginia does and has, and Lucas, and most of you on the call, that is something that I've always kind of regretted. I don't know that it held me back per se, but it is what I consider one of the things that I wish I had done that maybe I could have, that it just would have propelled my my career a little bit better. So we'll talk about that and education and the other things as we get into this.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you both for those kind of summaries. To everybody who's on the call, just want to go ahead and housekeeping wise, use the Q&A function, please. Don't be afraid to jump in and just type any questions you have as we're going along. I've got some prepared questions to kind of get our conversation started, but we're here today to discuss this topic with you all. So please, as we're talking or even before we get started, jump in the Q&A and ask those questions. I will work on making sure I kind of monitor that and jump back and forth between my questions. So wanted to make sure I stated that for everybody on the call. I will start with one that I've got here. We just saw that there's no one path in planning. We kind of had a pre-call to kind of prepare for this discussion today, and I thought it was kind of funny that there's one path to AICP now, right? That's kind of the marketing angle the APA is taking, one path to AICP, but there's not one path to maximizing your career, to getting to where you need to be. What were some of the decisions that each of you made that led you either to where you are or to make a certain decision? What was your driving factor? What did maximizing your career potential mean for each of you? And either one of you, if you want to start out.
Go ahead, Virginia. No, you go first.
So when I was working in the arts, I worked in undergrad in theater, and then also with opera and music and television. And the fun and exciting thing about being in the arts, especially when you did what I did, which was eventually production coordination, is that I got to travel. And I worked with CMT and MTV networks, and I got to travel all over the country in doing my work with them. And I got to see big cities. I got to see little towns. I got to see states that I probably would have never ventured to. Been to 47 states, and a lot of that travel happened because I took that position and took those jobs. Learned how to freelance, learned how to do a lot of that kind of work. But the great thing about the traveling for me was that when I was in those cities and towns, I got to talk to people. They think it's kind of neat that you work for television, so they want to talk to you and they want to share what I discovered. And it was very thematic throughout all of my travels. Was the thing that people loved to talk about the most was their community. They loved to talk about how their community came to be, the things that were unique, whether it was unique features of their community or, festivals that they had, something cultural. And I fell in love with so much of the United States and all of the different beautiful things about the communities here. And that really sparked an interest for me because I had always been involved in volunteer work. I'm from a family who is very civically minded. I had a member of my family who was a member of the House of Representatives for 30 plus years. My immediate family were always involved with local commissions and boards. And so we were always in public service, and doing what I was doing was fun. But it wasn't as fulfilling as I wanted it to be. And so I really, when I decided to leave the entertainment industry and leave television, I really took the time to think about what I had learned up to that point and what kind of career I could segue into from that. And after many conversations, several with my mother and father, who my father he was actually in one of the first planning classes at the University of Tennessee. He didn't end up going into planning. He ended up going into business. But I discovered that this really could be potentially my passion, and something that I could really embrace, enjoy, and love, and make it my life's work. And so that is what propelled me to go back to graduate school. And that's what led me to planning.
Awesome.
So similar to community service is really what kept me in the planning department, knowing that what I was doing was good work for where I lived. I think all of us, I think planners in general, love that aspect of it. I am a intensely curious person, and as we get later into this, I think Lucas is going to ask what I think some soft skills are. I think curiosity is incredibly important for maximizing your career. Just asking questions, being curious about what is going on in other sectors of in other departments in your city. Being aware and profession or your community in general. And I think the fact that I could answer questions, that when people asked, I wonder what's going on over here, I said, well, I've already done research in this. I've looked at this. I know this. And so that's really been a big thing in my career, is being able to say, I know who's doing that, or I know what's going on over there. And I'm aware of that, and I can use that to propel this project. I can use this to maximize what's going on another project we're working on. Being able to connect the dots and draw connections between things that are happening, I think is really important. And I, my satisfaction in my career came from knowing that I had people throughout the entire Houston community that I could rely on, that I could call, that I could ask questions of, that would kind of fill me in on what's going on, and that the work we were doing in the planning department was benefiting everybody. So that's really, to me, was key in my career.
That's great. I've got a couple questions in our Q&A. Before I get to those, though, there's one that I don't want to forget. Just thinking through some of the questions we had from our Menti poll before getting started. Margaret, this question's for you. A lot of the things we were seeing as barriers for some people were, hey, there's no career ladder. There's no ability to move up, or the competition's too stiff. Obviously, this varies widely. If you're in a small community, that might just be the situation. That was my experience at my last city. If I didn't want to be an assistant city manager and wait till whenever that was, I was going to have to go somewhere else. You were in a bigger system. There's a lot of jobs, but the people can stay for a long time. You made your way up to that director position. What were some of the things that you did, the things that stood out? Maybe this is an opportunity to talk about some of those soft skills that each time, I'm sure it wasn't just you on the candidate list each time, that there was probably some internal competition, some external competition. What do you think are the things that allowed you to keep growing within that big organization?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I know in cities, typically there is a set number of positions, and you're right, in smaller cities, there's possibly you have to wait for someone to retire or move on to someplace else. What I think is important, and what I watched in the people that advanced in Houston, either in my department or in other people's departments, was that they found a way to be indispensable. They created the jobs that they wanted to do and that they thought they were great at. In my experience, I was for a period of time in our long-range planning division, and we had 5 or 6 people who were doing a variety of long-range planning efforts, whether it was economic development or land use and parks and open space and all of those. And what I figured out was my great skill was writing. And so they would come to me and they would rely on me to help write some of this. I wasn't doing the research, and I certainly didn't have the positional power to be their editors, but I would help. I would use my skills to help them with their job. And so when the time came to, kind of expand the department a little bit and find somebody to lead this group, since I had already been doing this work and since I was kind of recognized among my peers as being somebody that could write and that was willing to help out, that really put me in a better position for promotion. And so what I would often suggest to my employees is to find something beyond your 8 to 5 job that you can help out with, that you can, whether it's in your department or somebody else's department, but find another, kind of develop your skills. If you're a good writer, go help the people in the Parks Department write their reaccreditation plan. Do something else to help sharpen those skills and to set you apart. And maybe the promotion and the salary increase isn't going to come when you want it to, but the recognition will come. And then that might lead to somebody creating a position for you or some other way of advancing. So, really just be somebody that people can rely on, that you're going to do that extra work. And I know that's, if you've got 80 plus hours, if you've got 40 plus hours of work you do a week, adding a little bit on is hard, but sometimes you can squeeze it in and just become the person that they go to for those questions.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Margaret. I'm going to jump back into our Q&A here, starting at the top, and just ask, we've got female panelists today. That's what the question says for female panelists. I'm curious to know whether there were any gender-related barriers that you experienced throughout your career.
I'm going to answer that, and people aren't going to necessarily like my answer, but I didn't necessarily find any. I work in a progressive city. We had a female mayor long before I even joined the department. We had female department directors. We had women who were leading in Houston back in the 70s. And so I think I was in a lucky position where women in leadership position were accepted early on. And I know not everybody's there, but I found that my age when I was younger was probably a bigger barrier than my gender. And it wasn't until I started getting some gray hair that people really that wasn't an issue any longer. But I think I was really blessed in a city that had women leadership. A lot of women had paved the way for me.
And this is why I love listening to Margaret talk. She always has like beautiful, beautiful things that she's experienced, and that's why she's a great mentor and someone to really learn from. I have to be honest. I didn't experience as much until I became a mother. That was an interesting kind of eye-opening thing for me. Was I felt like as a single woman without kids, I had a lot more upward mobility than when I had kids, because I haven't worked in places that are quite as progressive, and there's still a lot of kind of a male-dominated system in some of the places that I've worked before, and so it was the questions of, well, are you going to be able to manage this and this and still take care of your kids? And all these questions that I often would ask my husband, do you get these kinds of questions? Do you get these kinds of and it actually did lead to me leaving one job and going back to teaching, and kind of taking a step back from my career for about 8 years. And that's when I went into education and I was an adjunct professor for 8 years, teaching, because there was flexibility. But it was a really odd situation. I have had those moments as a female in the workforce, but I've had them more since I became a mom than not, which is funny. And it was only when my kids were young. And that's something I'm going to talk about a little bit later, but it's an interesting question. And I think there are a lot of us who do have those kinds of experiences. I do think, though, it is based on the kind of organization that you are a part of, and the type of organizational culture that they have created. Have they created a culture that is really accepting of women in the workforce and really help to propel them forward or not? I think that's, an important question to ask as you are taking a job and moving into a position. If it's a
Absolutely.
concern. Yeah.
No, thank you. And I can just, from my experience now being a father of 3 young kids, I see the whole scenario and situation different. I know that in the United States, the saying goes, women are expected to parent like they don't work and work like they don't have kids. And it can be an impossible situation sometimes. So certainly appreciate those comments and discussion on that topic. Patrice, I know you're on this call. You're not a panelist, but we got a question about jumping into the city management sphere from planning. And if you're in the public sector, you get to a point where that's the next natural step if you're going to stay with the organization you are. Just wanted to hear from your perspective, what pushed you to make that jump? Do you like it? What are some of the challenges? If you could just give us a brief perspective from that seat.
So I just was telling Virginia before we got started, we're in the middle of budget season. So today I may not like it, just because of the time of the year that it is, but no, I think, city management had not been on my radar. I have a good mentor in my city manager, here at the city, and I think he saw something in me, that I would be able to take on that different responsibility after having been the community development director for a few years. And so since I've been in the position, it's been about 4.5 years almost. I think it gives you a different perspective. You get a little bit broader sense of the strategic approach to local government. So I have enjoyed being able to experience other departments beyond planning and community development. In my specific role, I have responsibility for facility services and public works. And from a planner's perspective, I think it's good to be able to get into those departments so they can think about things differently, but also have the planning department think about their approach to projects and recommendations differently as well. A lot of times we operate in silos, and so we may miss things that are important to other disciplines. And so just trying to figure out how to balance all of the competing priorities has been really the main thing that I've learned since I've been in this seat. So
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Here in McKinney, I know we've got 3 of our 6 city manager's office representatives came from planning. And so the Jennifer Arnold, who vacated my position and allowed me to step in here, is now an assistant city manager. So I think, Margaret, maybe that's our May discussion, and have some city management planning professionals give us their thoughts and takes there. So I appreciate that. Coming back around, we're talking about career maximization. What does that mean? And I think one of the biggest things to take away, if you're in a place where you're trying to maximize your career, is that there's not one right solution. There's not one right path. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about is rejection, or maybe a time when you think that you're going to take that next step, you're going out on a limb and it doesn't work out. Margaret, I don't know if you've been there before. I'm sure you know people that have, if not yourself. How do you not take that situation personally and use it as an opportunity to continue to grow?
So I'd answer that I don't think you shouldn't take it personally. If it was a fair process, which we hope that it always is, then it was a personal decision not to select you. Um, I, I mean, not taking it personally does not mean that you go in, you go into a deep depression and you leave you throw your hands up and say, I quit. That's not what I mean. But it is about the skills that you have, the way you presented yourself in the interviews, the way it is about all of that. And so I think the way to respond is to figure out what could have been done better, how you could improve. And maybe that's going back to the interviewer and asking them what, how could I do this differently next time? What were you looking for that I didn't present? What skills can I improve? How can I get positioned for it next time? I mean, I think that's how we treat every failure that that's maybe how we should treat every failure that we have, is to figure out how to improve from it and move forward. And dust your feet, dust yourself off and try again and keep working at it. Um, I, so shameless plug, Virginia, let's talk for a moment about the mentor program that we have. I'm going to bring that up in this kind of, find somebody that's a mentor, find somebody that can help you, look at your skills critically and help you improve those that you need to improve. The city planning and management is kicking off a second round of mentorship. Our mentor program starts in January, and Virginia is actually managing it. And I see Jennifer Pruitt's on the call, so she's working with us also on it. Finding a good mentor is a great way of being able to look at your skills and improve your skills. Look at yourself critically and improve your skills to be ready for the next time.
And
Virginia, you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I think about, some of the times when I felt the most rejected, trying to break into planning, trying to get, my feet on the ground, trying to get experience, right? And I wish I could say that I dealt with rejection with a pint of ice cream and a good stress relieving cry, which is, that's really what grit is, right? You've got to develop that grit, a pint of rocky road, if that's your thing. But at the end of the day, it's if you get a rejection, it's really, there are some things, yeah, absolutely, you should think about long and hard. What did I not have that I should have had? And that's when a mentor really is helpful. And mine was Carol Coleman, she's a director of planning in Greenwood, South Carolina. And she is an amazing woman. She is a wonderful mentor. And she's somebody that at times when I was like, I just don't even know if I can keep trying to do this career, especially when I was trying to get back into planning after stepping away when my kids were small. I was mentally exhausted. I was physically exhausted. I just didn't know if I had the ability to go on. And I took a leap of faith, and it was her encouraging me and telling me, yeah, you can do this. You absolutely, if this is what you want, you got to go after it because you're smart enough to do this. You know how to do this, and you just got to believe in yourself. And without her being that encouraging, I don't know if I would honestly be sitting here right now, or if I would have pursued it any further. I would have maybe gone back to school and gone into teaching full time. And I don't know if that would have been, I love teaching. It's extremely fulfilling, but I don't know if that's really the career path I wanted. So being able to work with a mentor, and that is why we developed the mentorship program to begin with. I was really fortunate. Margaret took a shot at me on me developing this program for city planning and management. And I'm so grateful that she did. Because I've got, I had the opportunity to meet a lot of really wonderful people, to network, and to also help a lot of people grow in their careers. And we're looking for more mentors. And so if anybody else would like to share that experience with someone else, please let me know. But I think that is one of the most important things when you have a rejection, when you have those setbacks, being able to bounce ideas off of someone who can really give you meaningful feedback, right? Meaningful feedback. There are always going to be people in your life who hopefully who will comfort you when things don't go well. But having someone say, okay, well, let's talk about the specifics of your interview and where did it go wrong, or maybe you have a failed project. Let's talk about how this could have been better, or a failed presentation, right? Well, here's the way you can improve. And I think, that having that mentorship is just really so valuable, in also helping not just deal with rejection, but also have the confidence to be persistent and to move forward.
That's amazing.
Let say something to that before we move away from that.
Please.
If you are interested in being either a mentor or a mentee, it is a relatively short program. It's from January to May. So it's not a lifelong commitment, although a couple of those from last season maybe have created lifelong, at least career-long commitments. But Virginia's got a really well-organized program. It doesn't take a lot of time. It takes a little bit of commitment and a desire to help a planner that might be starting out, one of our emerging professionals. Virginia, can you put the link in the You're doing that right now. I can see you
I am.
typing.
I'm sorry. I'm looking back and forth between all my screens trying to make sure I've got the link. So I'm going to drop
Okay.
the link in the chat, and you can check out the program and apply to be a mentor if you're interested.
Yeah, it's a great program, and I think both the mentors and the mentees really gained a lot of benefit from it. Okay, I'll
That's
stop
awesome.
now. Sorry.
No, that's great. That's exactly part of it. I mean, I think that harks back to why this dialogue series exists. I found myself isolated, didn't have mentors, didn't have a connected group of planning professionals to reach out to. Introduced myself to Margaret in Minnesota, I think, and said, "Hey, thank you for your session. How can I create something where I can make connections virtually with planning professionals who are facing the same problems I am?" And this has been an amazing result of that. I think there's a few things that I wanted to just touch on here. And Margaret, I really appreciate the way that you said, "Hey, if you don't get selected for a job, you can take that personally in a healthy way." I appreciate kind of pushing back and saying, no, it is about you. It's about who you are. And I think that there's all the truth there. And how you can respond to that is really what matters. I think there is a flip side of it that in a lot of cases, depending on your situation, they also just might not have any clue who you are or any clue what you're about. And on paper, you might not look like the person they want, but that doesn't mean you should stop trying. Speaking from my experience, similar to Virginia, a little about your story. When my wife had our first kid, we needed to make some changes. We had to kind of reorganize our life, and so I applied to probably 26 jobs all across the country, anywhere. We were from upstate New York. I'd been working for about 3 years in a small consulting firm, and we said, "Listen, if there's a job out there that allows us to be a one-income family, let's see if we can find it." And of the 24 jobs I applied for, the one I was least qualified for, and the one that was the highest in title and position, albeit for a small community, is the one that stuck. And that was something that was unexpected, but that goes to show that there was jobs out there that I met all the qualifications for, had my undergrad, had my master's, had my AICP, and was more than qualified, and I didn't get an email response, right? But then the one that I was really stretching to try and make my resume and cover letter fit the minimum qualifications, they said, "Yeah, come talk to us." And I've done that twice now. Here I find myself again in a position that I had to stretch and bend. But if you don't try, you never know. And so I think that's the other thing. I think there's a lot of people that might sell themselves short, or you look at the qualifications list or the experience list and you say, "Well, I don't qualify for that. They wouldn't consider me." Well, hey, maybe they won't, but if they do, you either get good practice interviewing, you get to know what those questions are going to be. You get to meet people that you might not have met before, or maybe they will take that chance and it'll be the opportunity you're looking for. And so I think that's part of it too. And planning's interesting. I mean, we've got cities all over the country here, and there's a lot of planning jobs available in the United States. Depending on your situation, you might have to move, you might have to relocate. go back to that. What does maximizing look like for you? A lot of people said responsibility, title. A lot of people said salary. That's real. We have a need. Inflation is rising. Housing costs are rising everywhere. And so in a lot of cases, it might be that you have to look outside your organization or your community, because there are places that are hurting for planners and they're paying for them. And so I know that there's things out there. So I just wanted to kind of discuss that a little bit.
Can
Margaret,
I add
please.
something to that about interviews? So not all managers will do this, but as a manager and as director, I actually encouraged my team to interview for any job they thought they might halfway be interested in. Not because I wanted anybody to leave the department, because I didn't necessarily, but I'm a firm believer that the more you rethink your resume, maybe rework it, maybe apply and answer those questions in an application, and then actually go through the interview process, the more you learn about yourself. And the more you learn about your skills, and you develop your elevator speech. You just strengthen your ability to promote yourself. And so I think take every interview opportunity you can. Now, sometimes your managers are going to, if they hear about it, they're going to hold it against you. And you need to be a little cautious about how broadly you talk about what you're doing. But maybe you do sit down and talk with your manager and say, look, I'm happy here, but I'm just want to explore what other options are out there and how I would compare with other jobs that are out there. So I'm gonna, apply for these. It's not necessarily that I'm gonna abandon you, but I'm interested in learning. And I think the more you interview, the more you meet people that you don't know and who ask you hard questions that you then have to think about the answers to, the more you know yourself and you know your strengths and your weaknesses. And I think it makes you a better employee. The other thing I did, and if you're a manager out there, I recommend you do as well, is I did encourage our team to work in projects that were not necessarily planning related. As a director, I could do this. I don't know if as a manager you can, but we created what I call the 80-20 um, uh, week, where 80% of your week was supposed to be spent on the one job you were hired for. And I wanted to encourage you to spend 20% of your week doing something that wasn't necessarily your job, whether it was working with another division, helping them do the major thoroughfare plan, if you're a historic preservation planner or something like that, so that you learn what other divisions and what other groups are doing, and you network with those people, and they get to respect you, and that when they hear about a job coming up or in their division, or when they hear about something that might be going on in their network, they think of you and tell you about it, so that you've got an opportunity to explore it and find out. The more you network, the more you prove your value to those people that you work with and who you can meet with, the more opportunities they're going to bring to you when it's time.
That's awesome. Lynn, I know you asked a question specifically about moving from New York City Department of Planning to Department of Buildings. Maybe that might broaden your skill set in zoning. Will that pigeonhole you into technical compliance work? Only if you let it. So to answer your question, there's definitely opportunities to go in and out of things like that. So I hope that kind of answered your question. We have one more question about being early on in their career, trying to be more competitive and differentiate themselves as a professional. Do you recommend certifications, interactions with professionals aside from AICP? I think Margaret kind of touched on that a little bit just now. Networking is huge. I think the certifications are great. I think they're minimum requirements for a lot of the job postings out there. And if you want to make sure you get into that first, swipe right, swipe left review of applications, having those certs, having some things like that help you pass the paper test. But then beyond that, it's going to be a lot about what are the things you've done? What are the connections you've made? What are the projects that you can say you worked on? I think one of the biggest things that, as Margaret said, when you apply, you start to really hone in. What does your resume look like? What does your cover letter look like? My wife was very intentional in the way she told me that I needed to quit using passive language
Yes.
on things, and talk about what are the real figures and facts and numbers of projects. Hey, how much was that grant for? How many years did you implement that program? And so I think specifics are one of the ways you can set yourself out. And then being able to say, hey, I volunteer with APA City Planning and Management, and I'm in a leadership role in my APA division. So Virginia, Margaret, any additions?
Yeah, I was going to share that. Think about all of the skills that you've collected along the way. I really, I don't know the best way to say it. I really had to take stock of my skill set, because my skill set is wide and varied, right? It's very broad. I didn't start in planning. I didn't start in public service, but I had a lot of jobs, especially freelance jobs along the way. And when I was in college, I did, seasonal retail. That was like my college gig that I did. And I started thinking about all of the skills that I had gained over the years that I really did not consider to be valuable skills, but especially working in public service, they're extremely valuable. The volunteer work that I have done throughout my life, and let me tell you, I volunteer with APA City, but I've also volunteered for United Way. I've volunteered for Habitat for Humanity. I used to be a little Pee Wee soccer coach. I've done a lot of community volunteering, and that really helps you set the pulse on how to work with people and talk to people. Public engagement, that's a huge part of our profession, and being able to work with and talk to people, understanding internal and external customer service. These are all skills that you may not think about how you use these in your everyday life, but they are definitely something you use in everyday life. And I know, Lucas, you can probably speak to this as well, but like as a parent, there's a whole skill set that I have honed beautifully over the years. And it really aided me when I was an adjunct professor working with a lot of freshmen who needed just to come and talk to somebody. And I do that now with my work. I have coaching that I do with people. I do advising. And you think about all the different skill sets that you actually have, right? And don't just make it about, oh, well, this is what I learned in school and this is my skill set. There's so much. I mean, I didn't learn project management working in planning and local government. I learned it working in the theater. And that was a skill set that you really have to be precise when you are working on a show, a live action show, and be very precise about the things that are planned to do and the execution of those things. And that is a transferable skill. It's something that really you start in this field, but it can come to other fields and you can use those skills elsewhere. And I think it's really important when you're talking about your resume, you're talking about your skill set, to think about broadly, what is your skill set? Not this is what I learned in school, or this is what I did in this one job. Because your skill set, I'm guaranteeing, is much broader than just these small things.
Yeah. I want to add to that. So my project management experience came from running the book fair at my daughter's elementary school. That's really how I learned. And those were strange women to work with. And so how do you deal with people who are, it learns dealing with difficult people. That was that committee. So Lucas, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. Anna asked, planning skills that or skills we don't learn in the planning department, and that's that type of thing. I'd also say that an important thing that we don't necessarily learn in planning school, or that I didn't, is customer service. And I don't mean just customer service when not your, paying customers, not the people that come up to the planning department's window and ask for plats or a new zoning designation or something. But customer service means those people that you work with, those people that you work for, the public. Everybody deserves customer service and excellent customer service. And so one of the things I always tell people is be somebody that people can trust, that when you say you're going to do something, say it, and be responsive, and make sure that customer service is infused in every contact you have with people. Because again, if you're going to do that networking, if you're going to expand the people that you work with, they need to be able to trust you when you say you're going to do something. And that is critical. And that's all strong customer service. And so it's not just about the people that pay your bills, it's about the people that you work with. And I think Virginia was talking about group management. Working with volunteers and that type of thing is also critically important. And I just learned that writing is something that planners don't always do well. We often use $10 words when $5 words, and your Lucas, your wife's comment about passive language. Become a good writer. Learn how to write good emails that are straight and direct and to the point, so that people don't have to read 3 paragraphs of email when you're trying to answer yes. So those types of things, and those skills are all totally transferable. And once you expand, once you strengthen those skills, you can do anything, and you can present yourself well, and you can, and people will think, more highly of you, and you'll put yourself in a much better position for advancing your career.
That's exactly right. Well, we have reached the end of our hour. We want to make sure that we steward everyone's time well. I want to point everybody to the chat. You should be able to see a couple links in there. One for the CM credit link for today's webinar, and then another link to the City Planning Management website for the mentorship page. Please do consider being a mentor with that program. As always, if you want to get in touch with any of us, please reach out to APA City Planning and Management Leadership. Find us on LinkedIn, however you want to contact us. Thank you all so much for joining our call today, and we look forward to seeing you all in February, I believe. We're going to be discussing some interesting things about the intersection of municipal planning and finance, and how can we work those two interdepartments together. So please join us next year as we continue on with our series.
Thank you.
I have one question, Patrice. Are we sending out a survey after this?
Yep, I'll send it out as soon as we get done.
So folks, we really do read that. And if you want to be a speaker, if you want to contribute, if you want to volunteer for the division, we really do check those surveys, and I will be calling you, or Virginia will be calling you for the mentorship.
And please feel free to email me. I'll stick my email in the chat. Email me if you have any follow-up questions.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Lucas, Patrice.
Thank you.